Hello everyone, this is POW Ponder on Weather. In this update, we're going to be talking about our next storm system and the overall weather for the next 7 days. So if you do like weather related content, please subscribe to my channel as I will upload daily updates to keep you ahead of the storm. Good morning everyone, how's it going out there? This is your Friday update. So let's take a look at the overall setup. Man, we've got that massive winter storm that moved across the country, and it's still going to be impacting portions of the Northeast and New England today. But here's the overall water vapor imagery and what's happening back behind it as high pressure really settles in. That's indicative of all these orange shaded areas back as far south as into Texas. That's going to drain that cold Arctic air as a 1042 Arctic high pressure sits underneath, and it's going to bring your coldest temperatures of the season with all that ice and snow on the ground. But there's the setup later on this afternoon as in our water vapor imagery as this continues to traverse up the East Coast. But by tomorrow, that will be safely offshore. So as we look at the overall hazard map, man, there's a lot going on with that cold Arctic air and high pressure settling in. All these blue shaded areas, that is your wind chill advisory for places in the Dakotas, but it also drains as far south as into Oklahoma, the Texas Panhandle, and much of central and north Texas are under a wind chill advisory with some of these wind chills below zero. So yeah, and these purple shaded areas, that's a hard freeze warning because of high pressure going to be settling in overnight. We're going to be looking at single digit temperatures in North Texas and even hard freeze warnings for portions of central Texas and even further south Texas. With all that Arctic air continuing to drain down, there we still have our winter storm that's impacting parts of the Ohio Valley and into New England later on this afternoon as the storm continues to wind down. So as we take a look at the overall snowfall totals over the last 72 hours, like I mentioned, this has been one massive storm. It originated up here in Montana that dumped some heavier snow for them, and it traversed across the drought-stricken middle part of the country where these areas have been bone dry as of late and brought places into Denver with some healthy snowfall totals. You can actually see the snowfall legend on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, and all these dots represent the snow amounts you got in your area, and it drained all the way into New Mexico, the Texas Panhandle, much of North Texas and Central Texas, like Dallas. They picked up their average annual snowfall of 1.7 inches, but a good snow in Oklahoma City around 6.3 inches, I think. But it went all the way into northwest Arkansas. A fair amount of almost the entire state got snow in Missouri, as well as Illinois and Indiana. So no more donut for Indiana. They picked up some healthy totals for them. Back into Ohio, they added to their totals, but it was a sharp gradient as this continues to move across. This is just within the last 72 hours. And yeah, that snowstorm, that system will continue to push off southeast from here and then impacting these areas. But unfortunately, it came with the price too, because there was a lot of ice set up that went all the way down into the deep south of Texas, and a lot of ice that set up just to the south of here. So a lot of these areas were really harsh with a lot of power outages happening, and you got lingering impacts to come with that Arctic air continuing to remain in place for the next several days with high pressure. That's going to take a kind of a slow melt for a lot of that ice and snow to melt, but it'll eventually moderate over time as we go deeper into the week. But we are also dealt with the severe side of this storm too, down here in portions of Mississippi and Alabama yesterday. They did actually, as of right now, had several confirmed tornadoes. And I know there was a pretty big one into Alabama yesterday that did a lot of damage and unfortunately had a fatality with it as well. But yeah, that system is long gone, and that system will continue with that cold sector, with that snowstorm continuing, and the ice, unfortunately, for portions of the southern New England later on today. So here's the setup by this afternoon, these are high temperatures, folks. So that's indicative that Arctic air draining all the way down into Texas. We got widespread 30s. I don't think where you had that snow and ice yesterday in parts of Texas, you actually don't get above freezing for them, and to Oklahoma as well as Missouri. So underneath that snow and ice, you're for the most part not going to get above freezing this afternoon. So it's going to be a slow melt. And back here, down here by the southeast and Florida, you never really got that cold front. You're in the warm sector. I know places in Florida hit 85 yesterday. So it was plenty warm for them, sunny Florida, as this continues to push across. But yeah, here's the setup later on this afternoon. You got all the snow impacting portions of upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, heading into Maine. And then you got all that icy threat, unfortunately. So places like into Boston, southern Maine, Massachusetts, along the Cape here into Connecticut, you're going to be under the gun to seeing a lot of that ice. So this has been like one massive, what they call overrunning setup, with rain on the south side. Then you had all that ice and sleet, and then you had all that heavy snow on the northern side. And then you've got Arctic air building down from the north. So it's very unusual. You have a 1039 Arctic high pressure just dominating over Texas. That's why they've got all those freeze warnings and watches and wind chill advisories in place, is now that Arctic air really settles in, and then you got a snowpack on the ground with all that ice still on the ground, and you really drop tonight. And good chunk of Texas and really a good part of the middle section of the country as this continues to wind down. So as we go into that Saturday morning time frame, I mean, look at the temperatures. I mean, how often do you see a good chunk of Texas and much of the southeast below freezing temperatures, with even some single digits popping up in central Texas and North Texas, but even single digits in New Mexico and Colorado as you go back into Kansas and Missouri. So widespread Arctic cold on the backside, with the kind of a slow melt that you're going to have to be contending with all that snow and ice on the ground and that high pressure just dominating. So yes, as the sun comes out in the afternoon hours, you are going to have that melt, but then you're going to have that refreezing process as you get down below freezing again. So it's going to take a while in a lot of these areas for a lot of that snow and ice to eventually melt and be gone for good, throughout the week. So here's the setup as we go to Saturday. So yeah, that system will be long gone by then. The front will be well offshore, and then we kind of more or less high and dry for a good chunk of the country, as dominating high pressures for much of the country off the Pacific Northwest, the middle part of the country, the South, and much of the portions of the Ohio Valley, as the jet stream really buckles and kind of resets itself. So this was a huge event. So a lot of times, on the backside after huge events, you have a lot of clearing. It took a lot of energy in the atmosphere to produce this type of setup for a good chunk of the country. So the good thing about this, after this all moves out by Saturday, on the backside, there's not much going on. It's fairly calm and fairly nice for a good chunk of the country. But unfortunately, you got that, ice and snow on the ground. So it's just going to take a while for a lot of that stuff to kind of melt, and it will over time, but a lot of it won't go until as we get into throughout the weekend and then go into next week. So here's Sunday. So with Sunday, yes, you have these kind of sporadic little clipper systems kind of well to the north, really kind of lake enhanced induced snowfall. And then, yeah, we could have some rain showers into portions of Georgia, as well as the deep south into Florida coming across. And as we go into, that kind of that Monday time frame, again, for a good chunk of the country, you're dealing with that high pressure underneath. But over time, by now, a lot of these temperatures will try to almost rebound to somewhat just slightly below average to near average temperatures. For a lot of the country, you're kind of just in the high and dry and kind of resetting for the next system that I think is going to come along, but it probably won't come along until really kind of sometime next weekend. So as we move through that Tuesday time frame, again, these storm systems continue to remain offshore for a good chunk of the country, it's pretty much high and dry and fairly nice weather by the time we get into that Tuesday time frame. And again, kind of a repeat for Wednesday. So it really starts to wind down. It's been very active for a good part. It seems like one system been back to back, and now the atmosphere is kind of settling down a little bit. It's really settling down, really trying to, kind of regrouping for potentially our next storm system by next weekend. So overall, by Wednesday, you can definitely see as the temperatures really start to creep up a little bit every single day. Now, a lot of these places and portions of the middle of the country and in the deep south are more or less average temperatures of what you typically see for this time of year. But yeah, you can see these temperatures with the map at the bottom of the screen. This is not that cold, right? This is for February, so temperatures do rebound as we go into the middle of the week. So as we go into that Thursday time frame, we're trying to eyeball where our next potential storm system could be. This is the overall jet stream on the North American view. So you got dominating high pressure over much of the west and the northwest that usually depicts sinking air, and you need upward rising motion air to get thunderstorms activity, snowfall activity, any moisture in that atmosphere. You have a lot of sinking air for a good chunk of the northwest and the west. So underneath that, it's going to be pretty high and dry and above average temperatures. But underneath that, we're also looking at this lowering of the jet stream as these low pressures traverse across the subtropical jet. These will come across, right? And so depends on these little vorticities that are going to be forming by the time we get into Thursday and how they interact with these low pressure systems that are going to be coming across, and see how much of that's actually going to be rain and how much of that's going to be snow by the time we get into next weekend for portions of the Northeast and New England. But one of the things I think that's interesting kind of going forward, here's the overall ENSO outlook, right? We've been in a La Nina. We're going to continue to remain in a La Nina, but we've seen subtle changes over the last several weeks where I do feel the La Nina has somewhat bottomed right at around a moderate La Nina criteria. And we're seeing a slow jog upwards back to eventually what I feel is more or less ENSO neutral by the time we get towards spring. So, overall, this is going to be a subtle shift and a rebound, but it looks like we have peaked as far as like La Nina goes, and we still continue to remain a La Nina. And the latest guidance from the Climate Prediction Center has that and has us slowly shifting to an ENSO neutral by the time we get into springtime. So all that means is with those little low pressure system I showed you that are traversing across portions of the south, you'll see a lot of that becoming a little bit more numerous as we get deeper into February into March, and especially get a little bit more numerous as we go into April, as we get this subtropical jet back to become a little bit more active. And you'll have more opportunities, since we still are into the winter months, for the rest of February, as we time some of this Arctic air that still has the potential to come down from the north and time some of these systems from the active subtropical jet. You'll have a little bit more opportunities than what you have seen as of late, because a lot of these areas in the good middle part of the country have been just bone dry and under severe drought. So we are seeing subtle signs and shifts in the overall setup, going forward, but it won't last. It won't take, it's not tomorrow, right? It's going to be subtle over time. And then, so yeah, going forward from that by Friday, so we're looking at our next system as these low pressure systems continue to traverse across. You can see underneath this ridge of high pressure that's indicative of this red right here, that sinking air that's like not, that's not unsettled air. It's very, very calm air, and underneath that. And then you have that trough going to be digging down from the Ohio Valley into the Northeast here. So we'll have to watch these little low pressure systems that traverse across. And as we get into that Saturday time frame for next weekend, we'll have these little clipper systems comes across, and it's just about timing how these are going to be interacting with one another as these potentially try to phase together, and how much of this is actually going to be rainfall up along the east coast and the northeast, as well as the New England, and how much of this is actually going to be snow, because it is going to be impacting, interacting with some more Arctic air that's going to come, draining from the north, and we have those, kind of well below average temperatures by the time we get into that Saturday time frame, going back into portions of the Ohio Valley and much of the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. So we'll be watching the interaction with these little pieces of waves of energy coming across with these little, low pressure systems, and how they actually kind of phase together as we go into next weekend. So, but here's the overall setup for the next week. I mean, we kind of like reset. There's not much activity happening under that dominant ridge of a high pressure for much of the Northwest, much of the West, much of the central part of the country. This is rainfall, precipitation over the next 7 days, 8 days, right? So there's just not much. So we'll be watching these systems come across for potentially next weekend, and how much of this liquid precip off the coast here into the Mid-Atlantic, going into the Northeast and New England, how much of this is actually going to be in the form of rain, and how much of this is actually going to be in the form of snow going forward. So hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Thanks for staying with me. I think I am going to be taking at least a day or two off from doing daily videos. I have actually done a video every single morning here on this channel since Thanksgiving. So it's been very active, and I think now's the time I could probably take a day or two off and kind of reset and take a mental break from the weather, and come back on Monday strong and going forward. So hey, I appreciate you staying with me. Enjoy your weekend, and catch me in the next video where I protect you before and after storm.